All right, guys, welcome to another installment of Hope for Samson. My name is Hope.
And I'm Samson.
And today we want to talk to you a little bit about where to start.
Where to start? Okay, so a lot of times we've actually seen this question. Folks that kind of know our story, they'll ask us, okay, so I know I have debt. I know I don't want to be in that situation. I want financial security. Where do I start?
Right.
And so for us, there's also, our story that we always bring into it because we were there too at one point. 6 years ago when we first got married, we thought, okay, we're going to at someday pay off our debt. Someday we'll have financial freedom. But
I really want this new car now, though.
Yeah.
Those thoughts really did go through our head back then.
And so the question is, where did we start?
Yeah. So here was our picture of our finances 5+ years ago. We had $95,000 in debt, but then we also had about $10,000 in savings, and that made us feel this sense of false security, right? Because if something really bad happens, we have enough cash to pay for it. And so what we didn't really take into account, because we had so much in savings, was how urgent the situation was. The $95,000, the interest was growing by the day. So the payments that we were making every single month were not hitting any principal. It was just going towards interest, which is likely, if you haven't paid much attention to student loans, it's likely where you're at too. You're paying that minimum amount, and in another 10 years, you're going to have tens of thousands more than you do today to pay. So it's not the smart way to go about it.
Yeah. And so knowing, one, how much you have in debt is a great place to start.
So is debt even really a problem, though? Because back when we were just starting out on this journey, we really didn't feel like it was. And you might be asking that question as well. What's the big deal if I have student loans over my head for the rest of my life? Because I've kind of been planning on living that way.
Yeah. I've heard somebody tell me, I remember it was like a banker or somebody, and I think at the time I was thinking about getting a house. And so we're going through kind of like what I had, debts that I had. And I remember we came to my $90,000, at that time, $92,000 in student loan debt. And I was like, oh, well, I have that. And he's like, well, that's good debt. Student loan debt's good debt. And at the time, I was like, oh, that sounds like a fun thing. Yeah, it's good. It's a good debt.
Yay, me.
Yeah.
Yay, me.
And the reality is, it's like saying, oh, that's a good cancer to have. I think any cancer is a bad cancer.
Still cancer.
Right? Still cancer. And so, debt, if you look at debt in the right perspective, you realize, any sort of debt is not a good debt. Right. And so getting rid of that is the best option to go. In fact, I remember when we first started gardening, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this. When we first started gardening, I'm nervous. We had planted a bunch of seeds. Okay. And it was like these little 4 foot by 4 foot little garden beds that we laid out. And 6-7 weeks in, we had this one plant that was just it shot up. And it was taller than everything else. And it was just growing and had flowers on it. And it was massive.
Well, remember the cat came because we planted everything in a row.
Yep.
And then a cat came and dug everything up and spread it around. So nothing was linear anymore. We didn't know what was growing where. So it was just this big chaotic mess. And we just watered stuff and didn't know what was going to grow.
All the little labels that had gone.
It wasn't there.
It was all mixed up. So we had no idea what this
Stupid
plant
cat.
was.
I hate cats.
We're like, maybe this is what tomatoes look like. We don't know. And over time, we realized that was the one thing growing, and it was growing so strong. It was thick, it was strong, and it had flowers on it.
We were doing great.
And then at one day, I don't know if it was my dad or somebody came over, and they're like, why do you have a weed growing so big in your garden?
I was pulling weeds around a weed, giving it more space to grow.
But in our heads, that's a good plant.
I'm like, look how strong it is. I'm patting myself on the back. I am such a cool hipster.
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of fruit is going to grow on this thing.
But you might be thinking that what you have is a good thing when it comes to your debt. But the reality is it is a weed. It is sucking the life out of your finances. It's sucking the life out of you. And the longer you hold on to it, the more dysfunctional your finances become. And the more of your financial life becomes revolved around that weed, right? And so getting rid of it is the best thing, right? So that's a start, I would say, is to have this realization that this is a bad thing, to have a sense of urgency. And that had to happen for us. So when we first got married and we had all this debt, when we first had big conversations about it, for me, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Because remember, I met a banker and he said this was good debt. And, so it's good debt, so I can just leave it there. And I didn't have a sense of urgency, like, oh, we got to get rid of this. I didn't have any of that. Hope had all of that. And she felt like we needed to address this, and I didn't. And so I remember we had this big fight. You may have heard us tell this story. I wanted to buy a camera, and she didn't. She wanted us to deal with the debt, right? Yeah. And I was very frustrated with her. And I remember, like, I decided to go mow the lawn because I hated mowing the lawn. And I figured that would just make her happy and shut her up. And it
usually does.
Yeah, I picked up this book called Total Money Makeover by a guy named Ramsey. And so it was an audio book, and so I was just listening to it. And I think I mowed the lawn like 5 times over that day because I just couldn't stop listening to it. And I finished the book that day, and something sparked, and I realized maybe this is a little bit more urgent than I had thought about it. And so I would say a great place to start is to have a very realistic view on your debt.
Yes.
To have a sense of urgency about your debt, to have a sense of urgency about your finances.
So to give you just kind of a snapshot about where our society is in terms of debt, we're going to go over some statistics with y'all. The average American has about $93,000 of consumer debt. Not the average American family, that's the American individual. That's including mortgage, student loans, credit cards. That's from the New York Federal Reserve. The average student debt in America is $39,000. Millennials have seen the largest increase in debt in the last 5 years. In 2015, the average millennial had about $49,000 in debt. In 2019, they carried about $78,000 in total debt, an increase of 58% according to Experian.
Wow. That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy to think about? Like, this problem's getting way, 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 way worse. Way worse than inflation.
Yeah.
Like, it's a real issue.
Yeah. You know what's, this is just me being real, like when we first started doing like Financial Peace, we talked to our friends, and the biggest issue that most of our friends were dealing with was student loan debt. And credit card debt wasn't really a big deal among millennials. I would almost say like 5 years ago, at least for the ones that we were around.
Right.
But now, like, it is creeping up to be a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And people are getting much more comfortable with credit card debt. And I would say that's
dangerous.
Very, very dangerous.
Yes.
Yeah.
So where do I start then today? Say I come to you and I'm like, okay, I have this debt. I feel that sense of urgency that you're talking about, but I'm really not sure where to start.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that person?
So you need exact figures. You need to know exactly, down to the penny, how much you owe. Like, the number one thing that I'd say I hate it, but I think is like an alarm for me is when we're counseling a couple or talking to somebody, and we ask them, okay, you're ready to deal with debt. How much debt do you have? I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, you got to know. You have to know. You have to know down to the penny what that is, because if you have no idea where you're starting, you have no idea where you're going. Yeah. And you need to know where you're starting. And so you have to. So the first thing I'd say to do is to run a credit report, right, or a credit check, and get to know all of your credit, like all your debt, like all of the debt that is attached to your name.
So I remember I was fairly young. I was a registered nurse, but I was still wondering about my credit score. This is probably 10 years plus ago. But I signed up for freecreditreport.com. Do you remember like those jingles?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I need to know my credit score. So I signed it up. I got my credit score. I'm like, okay, that's where I'm at. And then, didn't think much of it. And then a couple months later, I saw this ding on my credit card, and they were charging me $35 a month to check my credit score every month. And that is, like, nowhere did it make it evident when I signed up for that it was going to be a routine charge. So you have to be really careful about who you go with when you check your credit. And you also don't want to do it super often. Right now, the Federal Trade Commission is offering free credit scores due to the pandemic. So you can go to their website and check your credit there, and it won't charge you routinely, and that can be a safe place for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and so getting to know where all your debt is at is a good place to be, right? And so you're fully assessing the problem. If you go and your doctor thinks you may have a very bad disease or whatever, and they're going to go do a biopsy, that biopsy, like that's a big deal, right? You go to the hospital, it's a surgical procedure to figure out exactly what the problem is. And so that's what it's kind of like. It's a serious surgical procedure that you're going to do on your finances to figure out what exactly the problem is. So treat it like that, right?
So you wouldn't walk away from biopsy results and be like,
Yeah.
You would want to do something with the information.
Exactly. So what do you do once you do that?
So you're going to find exact numerical amounts about how much money you owe to what agency, whether it be student loans, whether it be a rent payment that got turned into a collections agency. Everything is going to be exact and to the dollar. So what you're going to do is you're going to contact each agency. Right now we happen to be a pandemic. And so there's a lot of different resources that are available. Some deferred payments are allowed, so you want to contact those agencies and see if that's an option for you. And then you want to sort your debts from smallest to largest. Pay on your smallest debt first.
That's right. And so this is where you're now starting to make traction. And so, we're obviously big, Dave Ramsey people. And so we quote Papa Dave quite often.
That's what helped us the most.
Yes. And so the reason you want to start with the smallest to largest, not smallest interest rate, to largest interest rate. No, your smallest debt to your largest debt is because there is this emotional release that happens when you're able to get at least one of those debts off your back.
It feels good. It feels really good.
And it's incredibly motivating. And so know what it is, know where your debts are, and free yourself from that. I think for us, I think that moment happened for us when we felt like we're really in this was when we had about, just a little over $10,000 in our savings account. And we took $10,000 and we threw it at our debt. And it went.
So that means that we had $1,000 in the bank total.
Yeah.
Imagine that. $1,000 total.
And we immediately saw that number going from $92,000 to $82,000 overnight. And it was like this tremendous motivation to say, okay, we're going to do this. This is it. And so
Samson calls it a motivation. I would call it something different. It's kind of like akin to, because it was scary for me. That was my biggest thing, was like, wait, we have $10,000 and what if something terrible happens? What if we need a new car? What if this and that? What if one of us gets has some sort of hospital stay? Like, my mind went 1,000 different directions, and this was the most difficult thing for me to do, because it gave me that false sense of security, right? I think I'm okay because I've got $10,000 in the debt, even though I've got $95,000 I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I think I'm okay because I have $10,000 of money in the bank, but I've got $95,000 of debt that I need to take care of. So Samson says it was like motivational. For me, it was more like smelling salts, right? Like, whoa, okay. Like, we really need to pay attention because all of a sudden we have no money, like none, and we need to like budget the crap out of our situation. Like, that was what really put like the fire under my butt. I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is real.
Yes.
That's what my experience was with this baby step.
Yeah. I don't know what. So if you smell salts, it does that to you?
Like smelling salts. Like if you're about to faint and you put smelling salts under your nose and you're like, whoa, and you're awake. Yeah.
I didn't know you could smell salts in it. I can't even say
gosh.
that right. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Producer Christian is saying it is a thing. So it is a thing. Okay. But yeah, it does put a fire under your butt.
Yeah.
Like it makes you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's that. As you're starting out intent, like being intense, man, it changes the game. Suddenly you're on this thing. You're on the journey. There's so many people that I feel like they want to have that safety net sitting right there, but it's doing nothing for them.
Yeah.
All it's doing is providing a false sense of comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after you've got that $1,000 in the bank and you've got an idea about exactly what you owe to whom, and you start paying from smallest to largest, that is where you want to be, like
Yep.
your smallest debt to largest.
Yep.
So say I have this debt, but I'm also contributing a bunch of money to my 401k or my Roth IRA during this process. What am I supposed to do with that money?
Stop it all.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is, even if you get a company match or whatever, this is the point you want to stop all those other contributions, because you want to take your income and you want to throw the maximum you can at this debt. And so your goal is simple: get rid of the debt first, right? Mm-hmm. And you will catch up after the fact. I know you're saying, well, what if I'm going to lose my company match, or I'm going to not take advantage of all the things I can take advantage of? And the way I look at it is like, you are distributing your punch, right? Mm-hmm. You're taking something that could be truly impactful, and you're widening that, right? I'm not sure if I'm saying that well enough.
You're dispersing it in such a wide area that it's just not making as much of an impact. I get what you're saying.
You get what I'm saying, right?
You want to be hyper focused. How about that?
Yes.
Hyper focused on your goal of eliminating your debt before dispersing your income to your 529, your Roth IRA, your mutual funds, your matched 401k. Those things come after you get out of debt. Yeah.
And then once you're out of debt and you're jumping back into all those things, trust me, you will pick up steam and you'll make up ground. You will. And so don't think you're losing out. Because because the people that I think that do it well, the people that are really intense about it, they typically pay off their debt within 2 to 3 years. Like for us, we did it in 22 months. And so in 22 months, we didn't have our match or company matches, or we didn't contribute to IRA, whatever. But now we've definitely more than made up for that. Yeah. And so we're doing pretty good. And so that is where I think it's a better place to be, because you're able to focus all your efforts on the thing that is the emergency, the thing that is the most urgent, and that is your debt.
Right. And Dave Ramsey's done some studies, internal studies with this program, of course. And the typical person that followed this strategy that we're talking about paid off their debt and their mortgage within 7 years. Like, just think about the amount of money that is. Like, when you become hyper-focused and pay off that debt and do it all in order and methodically like that, you would be shocked at what you can accomplish financially. It's amazing.
Yep. Okay, so that's where you start. And so hopefully you stick with us longer as you learn kind of the tips and tools in this process. And hopefully we can be a help to you as you move forward and you make some steps. If you're on this journey, just let us know in the comments. Let us know where you're at. And if you have specific questions, post it right there, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those.
Thanks so much for watching that video with us, guys. We really appreciate you, and we want to be here for a resource for you. So please feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have.
Also, be sure to like and subscribe and hit that little notification bell so you can stay up to date.